Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Wednesday edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy. Up first, hazardous weather graphic showing some warning areas. Current one out currently for the Kobuk Valley. It's a heavy snow warning for continued heavy snow tonight until 6 a.m. Thursday, and looking at 6 to 8 inches total accumulations, heaviest there up toward the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. And then here down over the Yukon Delta, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast, that's a blizzard warning that kicks into effect tomorrow afternoon, Thursday afternoon through Thursday night for wind, snow and blowing snow, looking for winds to increase to 55 miles an hour in these areas. Now create blowing snow, reducing visibilities to a quarter mile or less at times, or even some whiteout conditions in some areas. And again, that kicks in sometime tomorrow afternoon and continues through tomorrow night. Otherwise, here along the Yukon River Valley up toward Galena into the Koyukuk Valley, southern slopes of the Brooks Range, as well as the Noatak Valley, the Chukchi coastal areas, and the western Arctic coast. That's winter weather advisories out for tonight for areas of snow and blowing snow and lower visibilities with several inches of snow falling, especially up toward the Brooks Range here. And from there, looking at satellite imagery, you can see the next storm coming into the Bering Sea out here, next front pushing in, back edge almost to Shimia here, and then another band to the southwest there. Kind of that's the leading edge of the colder air aloft there, and warmer air coming in, southerly winds kicking up to 35 miles an hour, maybe 40 miles an hour in gusts this afternoon at Adak, with snow changing to rain there, but still quite cold temperatures here over the northern Bering Sea. Actually, all the way down to the Pribilofs, temperatures running 10 to 15 degrees today over the Pribilof Islands. Winds down to about 10 knots there, right under an area of higher pressure there, but those winds will swing around tonight to the southeast, or east and then southeast, and that'll bring significant warming to the area there later tonight, and especially tomorrow. Low pressure still over the northern Bering Sea, keeping areas of light snow around St. Lawrence Island today, and actually light snow down to the Pribilofs there. That cold air coming off the ice edge right there, picking up enough moisture for persistent light snow for both St. Paul and St. George. Coming more showery conditions down over the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And system moving northeastward, this whole mass of clouds here pulling northeast. A little bit of light rain around the Kenai Peninsula. Kenai reporting some, as well as Homer, back toward Iliamna, Pedro Bay. Had some light rain this afternoon, but not a whole lot, and some light rain and showers for the North Gulf Coast, and areas of rain, a lot of clouds there over the Panhandle. On the chart today, kind of a frontal boundary, very slow moving, but not all that strong there over the southern southeast coast, bringing some occasional rain or just steady rain throughout the day, but amounts not all that significant, anywhere from a tenth to a third of an inch during the day today. And extending back to the north, actually lighter amounts up to the north there, some rain and snow showers along the North Gulf Coast, but again, nothing heavy. Areas of light snow anywhere over the interior today, and then picking up the winds along the Brooks Range there, and that's where snow and blowing snow became more of a significant factor there in the weather, especially for the western Brooks Range over toward Cape, the Lisburn Hills and Point Hope, Cape Lisburn area. Point Hope, peak wind gusts 56 miles an hour out of the northeast today, and much lighter though down towards St. Lawrence Island with some areas of light snow there. Higher pressure again developing over the eastern Bering Sea in advance of this system that's pushing eastward there, again bringing the warmer temperatures, increasing winds in toward the central Aleutians, for snow changing to rain, and we'll see for tonight that continues to push eastward here with westerly winds diminishing behind the front, kind of helping nudge that to the east, and then south to north flow, bringing warmer air up. Snow blowing, snow developing over the Pribilof Islands tonight as the gradient tightens, winds swing around to the southeast, but temperatures will be on the upswing. Same thing for the eastern Aleutians. Isolated snow showers for the Alaska Peninsula, and light winds with variably cloudy skies, dry conditions, high pressure building into the southwest interior. Weak low keeps it unsettled there. That low actually pulls back up into the Chukchi Sea there, or remains in that area, and that's going to keep the gradient on the tight side, keep the winds up, but probably slowly diminishing here over the western Arctic coast down to about Point Hope. Light variable winds for Kivalina into the Noatak Valley, areas of snow, and again the significant snow in the Kobuk Valley up toward the southern slopes of the western Brooks Range, and then that warning will end late tonight and by tomorrow. Otherwise, areas of light snow or snow showers here, mostly north of the Alaska Range, but some snow showers trailing down along that trough, possibly into the Sitna Valley, western Cook Inlet, maybe Kodiak Island. Isolated rain and snow showers north Gulf Coast. Light rain continues but slowly diminishes there over the southern Panhandle. And looking ahead to tomorrow, you can see high pressure becomes more dominant over the interior here with that weak trough. Just some isolated moisture with that over the Copper River Basin, eastern Alaska Range. This low kicking off to the east there for with the trough there. That'll keep it cloudy with some light snow, fog for the Arctic coast, especially on the central eastern Arctic coast. Back over the north slope down to Arctic Village there. Maybe some snow shower activity, especially midday and before for the Eagle area. We're actually throughout the day, chance of some light snow showers, and could be some gusty east winds there along the eastern Arctic coast possibly, but south Panhandle, a couple of weak troughs here. Front finally pushing south of the area there as flow becomes a little more northwesterly. High pressure building here to the southwest, but a couple of weak troughs will keep some rain and snow showers over all of the southeast coast tomorrow. Cloudy skies. Front pushing, trying to push eastward, getting held up by developing high pressure over the interior. So the wind's not quite as strong here as it pushes into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula as they'll be when the front pushes into the central Aleutians this evening and tonight. But a good gradient up here to the north. Again, tomorrow afternoon, blizzard conditions develop for the southwest coast, Nunivak Island, Yukon Delta, and eventually into St. Lawrence Island. Snow and blowing snow there. Winds on the increase, on the way up to 55 miles an hour in gusts. And then for the day on Friday, again, some moisture tries to push inland. Maybe some light snow showers in toward the central interior, maybe not, but areas of light snow and lighter winds now. This whole front really starting to weaken now as it pushes into this area of building high pressure. The surface is pulling off to the east there into the Mackenzie Delta area, 1,054 millibars. And that'll continue to ridge down and influence most of the central and eastern interior with dry conditions, light winds, and colder temperatures. Dry and colder for the Panhandle. Rain, periods of, for the Kodiak Island area. Also occasional rain here for the Alaska Peninsula. And warmer temperatures riding in on these southeast winds, so even the Yukon Delta could be seeing mixed precipitation changing over toward rain in the afternoon hours. Otherwise, lows tonight in the 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle, 20s and 30s, south central Alaska. West of the Alaska Range, much colder, below zero there, 5 to 15, Bristol Bay. Highs tomorrow, upper 30s, Kodiak Island, 30s for south central Alaska, and 25 to 30 for Bristol Bay. Highs in the 40s for the Panhandle, near 30 in the Copper River Basin. Lows, 20s to mid-30s for the southeast coast. Otherwise, 10 below to 10 above here through the interior areas. 20s for Bristol Bay, and highs a little cooler, back down near freezing or in the upper 20s, lower 30s, and then up to the north, lows below zero, but not that far below zero here from the Bering Strait all the way up to the Arctic coast, followed by highs a little above zero, a little below zero, depending on your location, and then back down below zero, 15 to 20, maybe 25 below, followed by highs, mid-20s there for the Bering Strait, a little below zero here over the northeast interior. And for the southwest coast, pretty chilly there tonight with temperatures about the mid-teens for the Pribilofs, near 32 for the Aleutians.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather for Thursday morning. Next system coming across the Bering Sea here, pushing IFR all the way up to the Pribilof Islands by tomorrow morning, and extending back down across the central Aleutians, moving eastward there. Pretty good VFR behind that. VFR northern Bering Sea into the west and southwest interior areas. Marginal VFR, southeast Bering Sea. Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island up to the Kenai Peninsula. IFR here over the northern interior, but the Arctic coast, mostly VFR. IFR there for the eastern Gulf of Alaska, all of the Panhandle as well as the North Gulf Coast into the Coast Range. For the afternoon, pretty good improvement here over interior Alaska with building high pressure, surface and aloft. Still some IFR up here to the north for the eastern central North Slope, eastern Brooks Range. Some marginal VFR areas of the Arctic coast, and slowly improving here for the southeast coast, especially in the north, but still holding on to some IFR elsewhere. This system pushing northeastward, and IFR making landfall early in the day, or at least by late afternoon, pushing inland there to the Yukon Delta and Nunivak Island, starting to push into St. Lawrence Island, extending on down into mostly Unimak Island there, eventually into Unalaska Island as well. Pretty good VFR back to the west. And for Friday morning, building high pressure here over the interior areas keeps this system from making much more eastward progress, begins to shun it off to the north. So IFR spreading up across the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula into Kotzebue Sound. But the Arctic Coast North Slope, VFR, good VFR central eastern interior, right on down into Cook Inlet in the North Gulf Coast, with IFR still lingering there over the eastern and southeast Panhandle, improving to the north. Some areas becoming VFR. Good VFR right on down across southern Alaska. Marginal VFR, Kodiak Island. And then for Friday afternoon, eastern central interior, all the way up to the Arctic coast, down to the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle. Nothing but VFR there. Increasing IFR spreading up to Kodiak Island, and IFR eastern Bering Sea, eastern Aleutians, right into the west coast there, especially into the Long Mountains, Noatak Valley area, but improving to VFR back behind that mess out over the western Bering Sea. Passes Anatuvik, improvement, starting out IFR, but improving to marginal VFR. Add again, no, go marginal VFR, especially in the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, good conditions there. In fact, all of the Alaska Range looking really good tomorrow. Rainy VFR, windy, open on either approach. VFR flying through Isabel, Mentasta, starting out marginal and then becoming VFR. Tanita, VFR the entire day. And Portage, VFR, could be marginal early on, but VFR for most of the day, especially in the afternoon hours. And Lake Clark and Merrill, or I'm sorry, Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. And for the freezing levels, right around the Pribilofs, kind of iffy if it gets that far north, but enough southerly flow coming in. Definitely see some good warming there over the southeast Bering Sea. 2,000 feet still south of the Aleutians, 2,000 to 6,000 feet there across the southeast coast. And icing, some diminishing icing, especially in the north here over the Panhandle. Could see some icing there up over the Arctic coastal areas, portions of the North Slope, but not too bad. Heavier icing here. Isolated moderate rime icing coming into the southwest coast, extending down toward the eastern Aleutian areas and beginning to push up towards St. Lawrence Island in the late afternoon. Another batch out here over the western Aleutians. And looking at the jet stream, pretty good jet now into the Bering Sea, south-southwest, 130 knots. Takes a turn to the east here into the west-southwest interior at about 120 knots. Then lightens up and becomes more northwesterly, about 90 knots here across the northern Panhandle. And at 9,000 feet, 70 knots southwesterlies, turn westerly at 60 knots there over the north-central interior. Pretty light up to the north, and not too bad down to the south either, except 55 knots north of the Alaska Peninsula. 3,000 feet, east-southeast, 30 to 35 knots along the central western Arctic coastal areas. Much lighter over the interior with building high pressure here over southern Alaska. Pretty light winds for the Panhandle. Strongest winds out here to the west with that frontal boundary coming in. 55 knots out of the south along the Yukon Delta coast, 45 to 50, or 50 to 55 down to the south. Turbulence, moderate turbulence. Most of the Aleutians, a little bit lighter here in the central Aleutians behind the front, and it picks up again out west. Also with the winds coming into the southwest interior, St. Lawrence Island, light to isolated turbulence for the Arctic coast.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snyder, and joining me today is Cindy Preller. She's the Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska Region's National Weather Service. And Cindy, we hear a lot about tsunamis in the news, probably a lot more than we used to, but let's remind everybody, what is a tsunami?
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Sure.
Tsunami is basically, it's really simple. It's just a disturbance in the water column. So the entire water column from the seafloor to the sea surface is disturbed by something major, usually a major earthquake. But it can also be a volcanic eruption, even an asteroid. Landslide is especially dangerous.
Okay, so if I'm sitting in my bathtub and I drop a bath toy, that could be a bathtub tsunami.
It is absolutely a bathtub tsunami.
Okay, very good. So Alaska is one of the states, or maybe the state, with the greatest amount of coastline, so tsunamis are a pretty major risk here in Alaska. Who is most at risk?
Yeah, Alaska is significant. We actually make most of the Pacific tsunamis on the Aleutian Trench. And it's where the Pacific plate is subducting underneath the American plate. And we produce some very large, great quakes. And of course, the most at risk is the Aleutian Trench.
Okay.
But that extends into south central Alaska as well. They're at huge risk. And then southeast Alaska's risk is really mostly landslide focused.
Okay. Are there any places along the Alaskan coastline that don't have a tsunami risk, or at least a very, very low risk?
Absolutely. The Bering Sea's risk is very low, and the Arctic's risk is very low as well.
Okay, so when we're talking about tsunami dangers, those are places that need to be monitored, but probably not really.
No, I mean, I won't say never.
Yeah, sure.
Because I know better.
Science knows better.
Right. So
very good.
Near to never.
Okay. Well, let's just say you're on the coast anywhere in Alaska. What are warning signs that tsunami dangers are threatening you right now?
This is super important because Alaska's greatest risk, especially out on the Aleutians and South Central, is a near-field tsunami, and then of course landslides in southeast. It's even more intense because we can't.
So shorter warning time.
No warning time.
Okay.
The earthquake is the warning.
Okay.
And that is the most important thing for anybody to remember. The water can arrive in less than 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Wow. Yeah. At the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, we need to get the warning out in 5 minutes. So for those near-field tsunamis. It's the earthquake is the warning. So if you feel shaking, and of course the first thing you do is drop, cover, and hold, and you need to start counting slowly to 20. The right way. How do you do that? Oh, I teach kids to do it with their favorite things. So 1 chocolate, 2 chocolate, 3 chocolate, but you can count anything you like. And if you're thinking of something happy, that helps. Especially helps kids, but it'll help your psyche. So you don't speed up because you're getting stressed out. Right. It actually lowers your heart rate. Interesting. You know, so if you think of something you love and practice that. So you're in an earthquake, you're under the table, you're next to the ocean. Right. This is important if you're next to the ocean. If you're not next to the ocean, don't worry about it. Just stay in place under cover. And you're talking about a mile, a quarter mile? What's close? A mile, even a couple miles. You know, our rule of thumb used to be a mile inland was safe, but the last few tsunamis have taught us otherwise. So, yeah, you know, in Japan, we had inundation up to 10 miles. So. And that was a big quake. That was a big quake. So you have a quake, you're counting slowly to 20. To 20. What's next? And if you get to 20 and it's still shaking, you need to evacuate. And that is, that's scary. Yeah. Because you're evacuating in a live event that's still shaking. You know, 1964 shook for 4.5 minutes. Indonesia shook for 12 minutes. Wow. Japan, I think, shook for 6. I'm not sure of that, but it was long. Anyway, more than 20 seconds. And that's a sign of a very major earthquake, the worst. Well, 20 seconds is a magnitude 7, so that's not the worst. But what a magnitude 7 can do is trigger a landslide. And those landslides might be a submarine landslide, so you won't see it, you won't hear it, you won't know it, and then the water's moving. So that's really, really, really dangerous. That's what happened in '64 first. Seward, Valdez, Whittier all had landslides first. And when you're talking about the water is a warning sign too. What happens with the water that gives you a very easy visual sign that something's changing? Not guaranteed. It might go out. It might go way out really fast enough to leave the fish behind. But that's not guaranteed. It might just be a fast flood instead. So either way, if it's acting like a super fast rising tide, faster than a tide should rise, get out of there. And if it goes out really fast, get out of there. You know, we lost a lot of lives because people will go check out the new tide pools or pick up fish or shells or, you know, so, and it should feel weird. You know, it should be weird. So pay attention to those natural warning signs and how you feel, because
those are maybe the only clues you have.
Right, and you know, sound also. You can hear a tsunami. It'll sound like a roaring train, maybe. Okay. Or it might sound silent because the water's been pulled out.
Right.
And that's pretty weird. Imagine camping at night near the beach, and all of a sudden you don't hear the ocean anymore.
That would be different.
That would be weird. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you also might hear blowing bubbles, and that's actually from the pressure that's blowing the air out from the sand grains, rock grains. So if you hear blowing bubbles, that's a little weird. Okay. Or clinking rocks, you know, like a rain stick. So those are the sound signs. So the visual is rushing in or rushing out, and roaring especially.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of work to get people and keep people aware of what the tsunami warning signs are and what their risks are around Alaska. And there's a website that can help them do that. Where can they go online to get more information for their school, their home, their church, their business?
Oh, there's several. The National Tsunami Warning Center has a website as well, and the easiest way to look that up is just NTWC.
NTWC.
The URL is not intuitive at all. Okay. There's also ready.alaska.gov. The state of Alaska has a lot of helpful stuff. Preparedness kits. They have everything you need to get ready. Okay. And then for teachers and others, there's a wonderful curriculum called Alaska Tsunami Education Program.
Alaska Tsunami Education Program. Okay.
And that's AKwx.
AKwx. Okay, very good. Those are really good tips to get more information and search that out and help your own community stay safe with the threat of tsunamis around Alaska. Next time we come back and talk to you some more about the Tsunami Ready program and get more in depth and how people can learn more about the risks and what to do here in Alaska. So thank you for joining us today, Cindy. And next time on Alaska Weather Facts, more on tsunamis around Alaska. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the marine forecast for the southeast coast Thursday. West-southwest winds 15 knots on the south coast. For the north coast, west to south winds at 20 knots, and southeast 15 for Lynn Canal, south 15 for Clarence or for Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots. And for the day on Friday, northwest winds, small craft advisories now for the south coast for northwest winds at 25 knots. Also northwest winds 25 knots for Clarence Strait, Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal, northern inner channels a little bit stronger. North winds at 30 knots with 6 to 9 foot seas. North coast here, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. And for Prince William Sound on Thursday, south winds 15 knots with 3 foot seas. North Gulf Coast, southwest at 20 knots, seas 10 feet. And southwest winds 25 knots here for Cook Inlet with seas running 6 to 8 feet in the ice-free water. Southwest 20 for the Barren Islands, northwest at 20 for Kamishak Bay. And for the day Friday, southwest winds 15 knots for the Barren Islands, otherwise northeast 25 for Kamishak Bay. Cook Inlet, north to northeast 15 to 20 knots, 3 to 5 foot seas. Prince William Sound, light variable winds at 10 knots, so seas down to 2 feet. And west-northwest winds 15 knots for the North Gulf Coast with 6 to 7 foot seas. Kodiak Island on Thursday, west to southwest winds at about 20 knots, southeast 20 knot winds for the Bristol Bay area. And the Alaska Peninsula gale warning, south winds 30 to 40 knots, strongest on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula here with seas up to 8 feet. And for the day on Friday, east winds 25 knots now for the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit stronger in Bristol Bay, out of the east at 30 knots there. Kodiak Island, east-southeast winds at about 20 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, south winds 40 knots, seas 12 to 22 feet. Small craft advisories in the central Aleutians, southwest winds 25 knots there for Adak and Atka. Then gale warnings for the western Aleutians, south winds at 35 knots. For the day on Friday, south winds 30 knots, Kiska to Shemya. And for the central Aleutians, west central Aleutians, south to southwest 15 to 20 knots. And for the Fox Islands, west to south winds 15 to 25 knots. And for the southwest coast, we've got gale warnings out tomorrow. That front pushing in, 35 knots coming up to 35 knots from the southeast. East winds increasing to 40 knots in the late afternoon for St. Lawrence Island. Gales also for the Perbeloff, southeast 40 knots, east 35 knots. St. Matthew Island. And for the day on Friday, Norton Sound, east winds 20 knots, east at 25 for St. Lawrence Island, and small craft advisories for the southwest coast, and brisk wind advisories as well, especially the Yukon Delta coast and the ice-covered area there. Southeast winds 30 knots, south at 25 for the Perbeloff, southeast 25 for St. Matthew Island, seas running 11 to 14 feet. And for tomorrow, east winds 25 knots for the eastern Arctic coast, central coast, northeast at 25. Gale warnings for the western Arctic coast, east-northeast winds 35 knots, much lighter there for the Chukchi Sea, out of the south at about 15 knots. And for the day Friday, brisk wind advisories for the Chukchi Sea, east winds at 30 knots, and 20 to 25 knot east winds for the western Arctic coast, central and eastern coastline there, looking at east winds at about 20 knots. For tonight, again, snow and blowing snow continues here for the Western Brooks Range. Winter storm warning continues for the Kobuk Valley for heavy snow, and some areas of light snow here actually diminishing. This is becoming pretty scattered here down over south of the Alaska Range, and some light rain persisting over the Panhandle. Out to the west, next big storm pushing eastward with gale force winds, rain, snow, and blowing snow, especially for the Perbeloffs tonight. Tomorrow, that main push up to the northeast now as high pressure builds into the interior. And lighter winds, though, for the Aleutians. This portion of the front weakening as it pushes eastward, but colder air, snow, increasing winds again toward the main low center back to the west. And then on Friday, that front kind of stalls out here along the coast, being held up by strong high pressure to the east. Areas of snow, but lighter winds, especially along the west coast here, St. Lawrence Island areas. Rain, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and Panhandle. Mostly sunny, clear skies, light winds, and some sun over the eastern interior from the North Gulf Coast all the way up to the Arctic coast, looking pretty good. Maybe some snow shower activity possibly getting in the central interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.